You have been working on task forces over the past 2 months, so I know some of you, I can see it in your faces, you're a little tired. A lot of work to do in 2 months' time, and so I know some of you came to me and said, I didn't realize it was going to be quite that much work, but see, that's how we do it. We get you in there, just a couple of meetings, but anyway, it's been a great 2 months on our task force. I really appreciate all of your work, and tonight we're going to do doing some wrap-up work in our task forces. Before we get into that, we want to talk about just some background on where we are. For those of you who are here tonight, and maybe you haven't been to a previous meeting this year and didn't know kind of the work ahead of us for this school year, we thought we'd just remind you of this slide. We went over this at the last meeting for those of you who were here, but I wanted to remind you that for those who are new, essentially what we're doing is we broke up our work this year into task forces at the beginning of the school year anyway. As you recall, last year we did a year-long audit of the district. Came up with a lot of findings and recommendations. There were some areas that the school board said they either needed more data or they wanted us to develop task forces to get to moving quickly to correct some of the issues or some of the problems or challenges that were found. And so that we broke that into 8 task forces this year, and they've been working for 2 months. And we're getting about to be done with that work. Then we will have, on the 21st of this month, a town hall meeting. And the purpose of that meeting will be to allow anyone in the community, perhaps who haven't been really involved in Project Parkway, to come in and give us feedback on our work. So that night we will be talking about the work of our task forces, and we will need to talk to some of the task force leaders because we may need some of your help that night getting some of the discussions that night. So that's a town hall meeting. It's optional for you all, but we'd encourage you to come if you have not been involved, let's say, in the task forces and you would like to learn more about them and provide some input on the work. Then we will have our next meeting of Project Parkway, the full group, on November the 15th. That night we will have the reports, the formal reports from the task forces, which are due November the 1st. So we'll be turning those in to the steering committee and making our reports that night. Just a reminder, no meeting in December. January and February meetings are tentative, and the reason for that is that what's going on also, aside from the larger group, is that the steering committee of Project Parkway is drafting the goals and the long-range plan for the district. And so they need some more time to do that. We're very hopeful by March we will have that draft. So we have March the 14th as a definite. We will let you know about the January and February meetings, but for sure no meeting in December. But as soon as the steering committee gets the long-range plan drafted, we will need to have a meeting so that we can go over that and get feedback and input. Then in the spring we'll have one more town hall meeting. Once we've gotten feedback from the big group, we'll make revisions, and we'll have what hopefully will be a final draft around the middle of April, because by May we need to take something to the school board so that in May and June they can look at it and hopefully approve it, so we'll be able to implement next fall. Okay, and then one other just side note tonight. If you have not been involved in a task force and you're here tonight, welcome. And what we would ask that you do after, we're going to be here for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to be breaking out into each of the task forces. And on your agenda you should see what they all are and where they're meeting. And we would encourage you to join one of them if you want and monitor what's going on and just listen in. And or you don't have to, but we encourage you to do that if you can. Or you can float to a couple of them if you want. All right. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Tim Hudson, Coordinator of Mathematics and Steering Committee Facilitator.
Thanks, Paul. Real briefly, a steering committee update about the work of that steering committee. You can see here that, yes, as Paul just said, we're drafting our 5-year strategic plan for 2011 to 2016, which will go to the board in May. I'm jumping ahead of myself. We are working with, as we talked about at our last Project Parkway meeting, 2 different sort of types of goals. We have student performance outcomes, student goals that our mission and vision obligate us to accomplish for our students. That's the first part, student performance goals based on mission and vision. But then we also have organizational goals, which you could call strategies for ensuring that student achievement. We're really trying to figure out, well, we have some things that we do as an organization that have direct student impact. We also have some operational goals that have indirect student impact, and then we're also still working with that draft of commitments that we've put forth, where there are some things that, for example, fiscal responsibility. That's something that we commit to as an organization, to be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. Where does that fit into our strategic plan as a strategy, a commitment? How does that all fit together into a very understandable document for our community? That's what we're working through right now. The first draft of the 5-year plan we'll have by December, as Paul was saying, and the second draft by January. With a couple of those dates that Paul just mentioned as well, we ultimately are looking at having the final draft to the board in May, where all of the different work of this large district comes together in very coherent focus for the next 5 years. That's pretty well where we are with the steering committee, and it's very complex work. I know that we have a lot of principals in here and department heads and divisional leaders who are always trying to put together strategic plans that make sense. We have a whole lot of things going on, and piecing it all together is part of the fun and really the hard work that we have ahead of us. So with that, I will turn it over to Kathy Blackmore, our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching, Learning, and Accountability.
Thank you. Good evening. How's everybody? Are you there? Okay. I do want to emphasize this 5-year process, and Tim was very, very positive about it. It is complex. And as I think about the next 5 years, it's where will the priorities lie? Where is the focus? And even thinking about, performance goals and organizational goals, just separating the two a little bit. So what I'd like to do right now is to walk through some slides just to give you a brief update of where we are in this process. So if you have a pen and you have the agenda in front of you, you might want to jot down a couple of things. And what I want you to be thinking about as we go through these, in your mind, if you were sitting at the steering committee, do you hear or see a performance goal around student achievement? Or do you see an organizational goal? Does that help you a little bit? Let's just think about it as we go through the process. Where would we maybe see a performance goal for kids' achievement and an organizational goal that hopefully gets us there? This is what the steering committee is wrestling with right now. So the first task force, if you'll hit it, is assessment, literacy, and communication. And I'll just have you right now look at the purpose of this committee. So those were the two key pieces. The first one is what? What's that top purpose? Everybody see it? Say it out loud for me so I know you're here. What are we looking at? It's understanding and communication of assessment results. And already we're trying to do some of that. Maybe you received an Alert Now call about the assessment we were doing in the fall. So it's not just communication, but it's also understanding the assessments that we're giving. That is a huge goal for this committee. And then, most importantly, how we use those results to change our practice. Okay, just right now, performance goal, organizational goal. What do you think? Do you like it? Now you know what it's like. What do you think? Both. The top part is more, and because here's how we're thinking in our head. If the top part is about understanding and communication, could we do that really, really well and never see achievement change? Definitely. So it's that second bullet, through the understanding and the assessment, that we could get to performance. But if we do one without the other, and let me give you another one, which is really something some of us lose sleep about. We could have the best written curriculum in the nation, But does that guarantee us to have changes in our achievement? Okay, so that's, sometimes I would say if you look at our 5-year plans of the past, we had a lot about a really good written curriculum, but it doesn't necessarily transfer into achievement of kids. So you can see what we're struggling with. And our assessment team, Literacy and Communication, is led by Kim Brandon and Joanne Miles. And do you mind standing up and turning around? Come on. I want to get names and faces with this task force. And here they are. And their committee members are here. Okay. So if we'll look at the next slide, Tim, now that you have their faces, here's what they're working on, their recommended action steps. And these at this point will be discussed tonight. And take a look at some of those. Okay, Tim, if you'd hit the next one. Okay, go back, sorry. There we go. So this is what they're thinking about as of tonight, and I know there'll be more conversations to come. So as you look at these results, performance or organizational? Leaning toward, heard somebody yell, organizational. If you had to pick one that just might get to those kids, Gretchen, which one would you pick? Which I know you're working on. The improving student feedback and goal setting and progress. Some of our kids are working on that right now and really recording their progress towards the standard. And we are seeing some transfer there. Okay, I hope I'm letting you think a little bit about where we are trying to figure out what a 5-year plan is going to look like. Okay, the next one. Efficient use of existing resources. And let's start out right now. Jenny Marquardt, where are you? Sandy, would you two stand up? These two are in charge of this committee. Turn around so we can see your faces. And they are studying the financial resources and human resources and how those are allocated to each of our buildings. They are looking at board policies related to this process and more conversation to come. And again, we have a challenge in our district as we look at, say, staffing models and how different resources are allocated because our schools are different in population and in demographics and all of that. So this committee is looking at these two issues. And I'm going to turn to be sure. The next one. And here's what they're doing. The piece that I highlighted was critical success factors. That would be interesting conversation. What would those be? How would they translate to multiple divisions and departments? So what would we use? And this is important to remember. A charge of the steering committee is that we don't just stop by writing this plan. The steering committee continues to monitor it the next 5 years. So my guess is we would be monitoring, yes, those critical success factors yearly, sometime, quarterly. Okay? All right, next one. Full day kindergarten. Take a look at the research happening with this committee. Elizabeth Mays, Kevin Mabey. God, you matched tonight. That is, you called each other. Great committee working, and you all, as you look at what they're doing, they are collecting lots of data. A survey has gone out. Yes, Elizabeth? Has it started coming in? Are we seeing good return? Fair return? So if you got that survey, be sure to turn it in because we are really looking at this full day. The board has asked us to look at cost, best practice, and this survey's out. And hopefully coming back with lots of comments. Okay, the next one is future topics of study. Aaron Wills, Melissa Moulton, would you stand up, please? This team is leading this committee. And I think from what I've heard from Aaron and Melissa is this will be ongoing. We're going to constantly be looking at what's out there and how do we continue to study future topics, but you'll see theirs listed. Everybody see those? They're creating suggestions and how do we continue to monitor the landscape. Good? Okay, next one. Length of day and start and end times. Jason Rooks and Nan Johnson. Did you match too? And Will, you're in that group too. What can I say? You have yellow on. That's great. That is really too funny. It's when they say when you work together often, you start wearing the same clothes. All right. They are gathering data about current literature and journals, and I know you've been reading a lot about sleep and finding out what the research says and what other districts are doing. And look at that last bullet. Studies that are beginning to look at time of day to student achievement. And we're hearing that from the federal level as well. Does it really help student achievement? You know, you've heard that year-round school, length of day, how often kids are in school. And some of the research is showing it really depends on what they're doing in school when they're there. Next slide. They're also looking at other districts. They're working with Will on bus transportation schedule and flexibility, high school sports and activities, and any changes on teacher contracts, length of the day. Okay, next one. One more, and then what next steps, and they're pulling data together to present to the board. All right, Paul? And this is Paul Tandy. You want to stand up, Paul, and turn around again. And Lynn Midyett, where are you? Do you match? Kind of. Gosh. This team is how strong, Paul? How many? Oh, my goodness, like 30. It is our largest committee. Our largest committee. And Lynn and Paula are breaking off into other smaller committees and coming back together. I think this is big enough. Would you just take a second and read this slide? One of the questions asked from last year as we surveyed students about had they been bullied was what do they mean by bullying, what do we mean by bullying, and even getting a common definition that we can say to kids, this is what we mean. As you know and are seeing in the news, such a big issue for all of us right now. This is one of our fix-it committees, meaning we want to put things in place as early. I feel like we even are now, but as early as second semester after these recommendations. So this committee is specifically looking at these bullets probably as soon as we get a go from the board. All right, and the last one. Not the last one I like. School enrollment and boundaries. This is Desi Kirchhoffer. Where are you? Oh. What are you? And Ed Zumwinkle, stand up. You don't look alike. That's good. They're brief. There's going to be quite a bit of work tonight to resolve. The first one is a fix-it from the board. We have North Area schools that are crowded that need to be fixed before the beginning of school next year. And that's the first bullet. They are developing a plan or process for boundary changes or attendance areas later on in the process, but that top one about the North Area needs to get fixed. They're talking about 3 options tonight at the meeting. And then our last committee is the teacher evaluation model, and we have 4 people leading this committee. So Julie Pepper, I know I saw you. There you are. And Mary Muckler, Jowanda Bozeman, and Liz Morrison. You want to stand up? And Jowanda and Liz. Okay. This committee is clap for them. They have really been working hard. Mercy. This committee is a committee that, by policy, by procedure, we have in place in Parkway to revise our teacher evaluation model. So they've been at work, and you can see what they're doing. And they'll be talking about aligning the domains to mission, vision, learning principles. That'll be their next step. All of these committees will be working from this moment on till tonight. They'll be done around 9. So they are working committees. And as Paul said, if you are not a member of these committees but just want to go observe, we encourage that. But we also want you to know that the facilitators of these committees are not going to do a history of all the work that's happened up to now. And I think that's really critical. So we ask if you're joining a committee to observe that you join it as a real good listener. And if input needs to come later and catching you up, that's okay. But they're really moving ahead with the work that needs to be accomplished tonight. Nikki will have this PowerPoint on our website so you can see the work. And when we come back together in November, we'll begin to hear final recommendations from these committees. Any questions for me before you break up? So again, back to your agenda. You have room numbers of where your committees will be working tonight. And I want you to continue thinking about how does the work we're doing right now with these task forces, does it end up in the 5-year strategic plan? Does it end up with other existing committees? For instance, the assessment, literacy, and communication, does that end up with the sitting assessment committee in the district? Or is it part of the 5-year strategic plan process? So again, steering committee members are here as well. In fact, would you all kind of raise your hand if you were on the steering committee? And these people just way high. Give it a minute. So if you have questions about the strategic plan, we're also available for you if you have any questions. Are we good, Tim, Paul? Good to go? Good to go. Have a great evening. Hope it's real productive. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give us a call.